Hello and welcome, Patricia Cutright. This is Sarah Spector for representing Native Voices of the Book Publishing Company. And I'm very happy to be interviewing Ms. Cutright. I recently read her book, just so I don't screw anything up, going back to this window, Native Women Changing Their Worlds. And it's really, it's a remarkable book and it's getting rave reviews. And I would like to, we spoke a little the other day, and I was interested in your background that you were recounting to me about your family. And I asked you what you would like to focus on for this interview. So if it's okay with you, we can start that way again.
I'd love to. Thank you. Great. Would you like me to share a little bit on kind of what motivated me to write this book and some
Yes.
little bit of background?
I'd love it. I have some questions for you if the opportunity arises, and if not, we'll just go with the flow.
Okay. Well, I'll just give a very short synopsis of what motivated me to write this book, and hopefully, what will motivate other people to think back on their families and those really important parts that it kind of grew you up to who you are now. And I came from a family. I'm Lakota Sioux. I'm from the Cheyenne River tribe in South Dakota. And both my parents, my mother and my father, were born and raised on the reservation. My father, his family was from the Cheyenne River Sioux Reservation, and then also Rosebud. And my mother was enrolled in the Cheyenne River Sioux. She came from a family of 9 sisters and 1 brother, and they lived in situations that all of us can hardly get our heads around. They lived out on the prairie, the Cherry Creek area outside of Eagle Butte, South Dakota. They lived in what we would consider a yurt, really, more or less just a kind of a 4 walls with a big potbelly stove or an incinerator stove in the middle of the basically 1-room house. There was 12 of them in that house at different points of time, and but they grew up strong Lakota women, and throughout their lives they really imparted that strength and that resilience with the rest of us. All of the children, I have 5 in my family. I have somewhere between 35 and 40 first cousins. And so we were a large family. And we were a very close family. And so as I thought about this throughout the years, and of course as my mother and my father, my aunties and uncles all started passing on, I realized just how important their lives were, that molded and shaped my lives and the way I look at my life and the way I look at how I approached problem solving and how I approached the work I do today. So that's kind of the background on what motivated me to look at writing about strong Lakota or strong Native women.
Well, thank you for that. Let's see, I've got about 13 questions or something. And you can graze over them or spend as much time as you wish on any of them. I was wondering, and I know you recently retired from your post as, can you please repeat that for me?
Yes, I was Dean of Libraries at Central Washington University.
Mhm.
Yes.
Thanks. And I wanted to ask you how you how you came to your path as a writer, if that's a question you care to answer for us.
I think when you're in academics, meaning when you work in a college or a university setting, especially as a faculty member, you're expected to write, and uh, your writing is and your research is what keeps you valid and up to date in your craft. And so I spent most of my life in academics, and so that really, the whole writing part of my profession was or my career was what really motivated me
Mhm.
throughout. Um, but that was very different writing from what I did recently. My writing recently was more nonfiction, more popular writing, whereas academic writing can be kind of stodgy, and my forte was really dealing with technology and libraries, and so much of my writing, well, actually all of my writing up until this book, was writing chapters and books and writing scholarly articles for journals. And so I have that background, but this was a leap of faith on my part that I could actually do something like this and make it interesting and informative.
And was there some kind of, was there a specific event or something specific, or specific things that sparked your desire to write about these women, these accomplished women?
I think mostly growing up the way I did with such strong Lakota women around me, I knew the strength and the resilience that I learned and received from that upbringing made me interested in just how uh, on a much more broader spectrum, uh, how these women had an impact on their worlds. Not only, Lakota women, but all Native American and First Nations women. How what kind of impact? What did they do to around their communities that really made a change in people's lives? And so that's when I started looking at how I could really put forward these ideas and hopefully give role models that young people can emulate. They can see that you can survive, and not just survive, but you can really be successful no matter what kind of environment or what kind of background you come out of. You can rise above and you can make it happen.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm a little bit aware of I don't know what to call it, the state of some of the issues on reservations and in the indigenous or First Nations world today, and the high rates of suicide among especially young women on the reservations and so forth. So I imagine that perhaps that was somewhere in the background of your choice to write this book.
Absolutely. One of the things that was repeated in a number of the chapters that I wrote was these women, as they grew up and grew more um, confident and more aware, this whole idea, or this whole tragedy or crisis of the murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls, is something that I've become keenly aware of, and have really been trying to get more and more involved in making a difference in finding these women and bringing closure for these families. In my life, my uncle, and this has been 60 years ago, my uncle was basically murdered on the reservation, the Cheyenne River Reservation, many years ago, right after the Second World War. And to my knowledge, there was never any, he was hit, it was a hit and run. And to my knowledge, there was never anyone, really sought after. There was never any criminal um, ramifications on that. And so I know almost every Native American family in this country has a story like that, and it really makes me feel like this time with the murdered and missing Indigenous women, the crusade campaign that's really getting legs now. There's a number, our Senator Maria Cantwell, a number, Senator Patty Murray. There's a number of people who are really pushing to get legislation done, and this is important because these people are not forgotten. And I think that this is something that we need to really bring up and highlight.
Mhm. And in our last conversation, you briefly mentioned two of the women in your book. How many women are featured again in your book? In
There,
this book?
there are 12 chapters in the book, each featuring a different woman. There, three of those women are First Nations or Métis, and so from Canada. Um, and yeah, there's these women. There's three of the women in the book are have just over the last year become even more prominent in that. Of course, the Senator, our Secretary Deborah Holland, who is now our Secretary of the Interior, is in the book. Representative Sharice Davis from Kansas. Sharice and Deb were the first Native American women ever elected to the House of Representatives. And then also Heather Dawn Thompson, who was just very recently appointed as the Executive Director of Tribal Affairs for the Department of Agriculture in President Biden's administration. And so it's been really fun to see these people who I looked at more than 100 women. I read their biographies. I looked and narrowed it down to 12 women that I included in the book. And it's really heartwarming to see that maybe I was right in choosing these women, because they truly are, all 12 of them have been and still are just remarkable women who are doing good things.
Mhm. Let me ask you this, something just occurred to me that's not on my list of questions. Does anything come to you in regard to what, if anything, Native women or Indigenous women have to offer our world at large, specifically, if you care to address that?
I believe that Native women, Indigenous women, have a very special quality that I think can uh, that does change worlds. It changes their worlds around them, in that they have this incredible ability um, to really impart a calmness and a problem solving and a resiliency aspect to any any piece and any part of what they're doing at that time. You know, they may still be living out on the reservation, um, having a very, very difficult time with children around them, but they instill that strength and that ability to succeed. And I think that that's really what um, makes Native women, and I really shouldn't narrow it specifically to Indigenous. Really, women of color are just, the backbone and the strength and, that make this, there is a saying in the um, Cheyenne, people that, a country doesn't, a community doesn't go down until their women's hearts are on the ground. And I'm really paraphrasing there, but it illustrates so significantly what women mean in the Native or the people of colors communities.
Hmm, that's beautiful. Um, and let's see. This is maybe a little out of the blue, but do you consider your writing to be a spiritual practice?
I do. I do. I feel like um when you're writing about, especially about very strong people, very strong women like this, you can you do tons and tons of research and you recognize just that inner strength that made these women want to move forward, and that inner strength you start to recognize in yourself as you're moving forward. And a good example is in the book, Secretary Deborah Holland. She makes a statement that every morning when I get up and say my prayers, and you know that really struck me because this is a woman who's very confident in herself. She's not worried about, oh, you know, are people gonna think that I'm weird or are people gonna think that I'm weak
Mhm.
because I don't hold that I can do everything myself. That I need that help. I need that spiritual help to give me that strength to move forward. And I hope that that same type of strength is emulated in my book because uh, there were moments when I needed to illustrate that strength also when I just didn't quite know if I was picking the right words or if I was being too forward on what I was trying to get across, what needed to be put forward on the page. And so I
Mm,
do believe that there is that aspect in writing, and and I'm not talking about a spirituality that's particularly connected to an organized religion or anything like that. It's a spirituality that you gain and you grow from the environment around you.
mm, that's beautiful. I got goosebumps. um, let's see. Well, you alluded to some challenges you had while you were writing the book. I don't know if you care to elaborate on them at all. If not, that we can move on.
I I believe that you know probably every writer feels these points, and there were some of the women that I felt much more connected to than I did. You know, some of the other women, and actually three of the women are have passed away, and so I had to, you know, really connect with their families and yes, I was uh, very concerned about, how are you going to react to me writing these stories or this story? And I think that was probably the toughest time for me, was when I was trying to get those little bits and bobs out of people that really made it a personal story for people to really connect to and understand that this person probably is just like me, and I hope that I can grow up to be just like them. And so
That's beautifully expressed. Um, well, I know that this book I've been told that this book is intended to be a young adult book, and is that the audience you were thinking about when you wrote it?
yes, yeah, I did, because that's what I was told also. It's a young adult, but my whole lifetime, I mean, I was in libraries for 35 years, and my whole lifetime in libraries um, gave me the background and the understanding that there's very little, I should say, there very few librarians would look at designating, books in these different, categories, when you're working with children, um, and young adults, and college age, young people. uh, you evaluate, you look at the students, and you say, well, you may be a fifth grader, but you may you may enjoy this book that my ninth graders or my high school students are reading. And so when I was writing that book, I realized that this really is something that anyone, no matter how, as long as you can read a word on a page, no matter how young or how old, I hope will find interesting, because there's so much in each one of these women's lives that you can really gain from, and you can really better understand the world around you by reading these chapters.
Yeah, and I didn't have a clue before you told me, before you just told us that you had narrowed it down from 100 women to 12. I mean, that's really quite incredible. Um, did you, let's see. Hmm.
I I might add just a little tag on to that, dealing with, categorizing the children's books to young adults to whatever. And actually, in the little blurb biography in the back of the book, it gives a little bit of information on me and my growing up. And I think where that really came in, to my life, was I was pretty young. I was probably in the first or second grade, and I dearly loved. My auntie would take us all down to the public library, and I loved to read. And I made the horrible mistake of venturing from the children's section into the what would be considered young adult or teen books. Back then is what they were calling. And the librarian cornered me and said that I shouldn't be in that section. Well, I was reading a Nancy Drew. I had picked up a Nancy Drew book and started reading them. And I finally convinced her, after I read a little bit, I finally convinced her that I could read those books, and she allowed me to check the one book out. And within a matter of months, I had cleared the shelves, and read, my Nancy Drew and my Trixie Belden and my Hardy Boys. I was a wildly mystery reader. And I think that that really drove home to me, or instilled in me at a very young age that, children are full of surprises, and you don't look at a child and say, well, you're in the first grade, and so you can't, yeah, you can't, you belong in this section. And so I think, going back to that previous question, I think that that probably had a lot to do with me, making sure that when I was writing this book, that it would appeal, and it would give, to any reader who picked it up and who could interpret and and read the words.
That's nice to hear. Now, since you mentioned all of the the long research and the background I don't know what to say, you endured, you went through to create this, to produce this book. I hesitate to ask you this, but I will. Do you intend this to be a standalone book, or are you considering making a series out of it?
Well, right now I have a garden that needs tended, and um, I've been asked that a number of times, and I think, I probably, somewhere on down the line, will like to start looking at other women. I like you mentioned. My little box right back there is full of all of the women that I went through, and starred one and starred two and highlighted the one. And so, I think, and of course every day, that's what, I was very careful not to just look at, the people that we're more aware of, the the native women who certainly deserve all of the acknowledgments that they've received in the past, but they're women who have done good things, and they're in that second stage of their lives, or third stage. I wanted to make sure that I had a good balance of not only women who are out there and people know about, but I also knew that there are people like Heather Dawn Thompson who have done incredible things in their lives that are, that aren't on the front page of the New York Times, or, they really deserve the acknowledgement and the recognition, and they're growing, and they're gonna do good things over the years, to come, and they're going to be just as forceful and just as impactful as Wilma Mankiller and some of the wonderful women that have preceded them.
Mhm. Well, I want to start winding down because I don't want to tire you or anybody out. But I will mention that I was, for some reason, the oldest woman in the book. What was her name? The one, it seems to me that she was either born in the 20s or was active in the 20s and 30s. She was,
Oh,
anyway, but
Elsie?
yeah,
Are
yeah,
Elsie?
yeah, yeah.
Yes, Elsie was a wonderful, wonderful woman that I just happened to, in all of my reading. Uh, there was just one article that popped up that talked about her, and I thought, I yeah, I've never heard of her. She was First Nations, and yeah, I thought, who is, so I started doing a little more, and this woman was just an astounding woman who. Not to give the whole story away, but was not educated herself, but an incredibly brilliant woman, highly intelligent, and she was the first woman chief, for the First Nations, and she knew that education was what was gonna make a difference in in her community. So she literally drove, children who didn't have access to high school. She drove children herself because they couldn't, the school bus didn't come on to the reserve, and so she made it a point, to, drive them, purchased an old hearse so that it would be big enough to haul all of the children. And she was just an amazing, remarkable woman. And I had the pleasure of being able to communicate with her daughter. And she shared some stories, or pointed me to some stories that were just remarkable. But yeah, there's just amazing people out there.
Well, thank you so much, Patricia Cutright, for writing this book and for everything, all the research you've done. And in my greedy way, I want to put in a vote for another part in the series. I want you to keep on writing these books, and I want to hear about more of these women. So thank you. Thank you very much for speaking with me and for bringing light to these women and these Native women. And thank you for all you do.
Well, thank you, Sarah. I really appreciate this time with you, and I do appreciate the ability to talk about the book. Thank you again.
You're welcome.
Lele me.